Hello and welcome. Today I wanted to do a review of the Electrum Sabercraft Aegis. Now the Aegis is the third model from Electrum Sabercrafts. Their first model was the Errant, which was modeled after the look of an ancient sword and was a pretty well-rounded saber with a couple sharp bits. The second model was the Torrent, which was a very great spinning saber, very light, all curves, no hard edges, very quick saber. And the Aegis here, this is named after the shield, or the divine shield. So this is designed to be a dueling saber. And so let's take a little bit of a look at the features of this thing. Now let me go ahead and give the camera a close-up of this.
You're in fire. Shatter point.
Alright. Now, this being my third review from Electrum, or of a different saber from Electrum Sabercrafts, I'm not going to go into the details of their diadium board and what all it does and how it works in the Unity app. I'm actually going to link my review for the Torrent, which is the most recent time that I've done that, in the description for this video. So if you're looking for a look at the features, which I just sort of showed you in a brief form when the saber was pretty close to the camera there, if you're looking for a detailed review of the features or of the functionality or anything like that, or a look at the board, then just look at that other video and that'll have, this thing has pretty much the same innards as the other. What you did notice that was different on this thing is sporting their new ion switch. Now that's a pretty detailed switch. Actually, I think it's one of my favorites now. When you order these from them, you get to choose the color of the switchblade. This one's blue, but they have black and red and amber as well. And you get to choose the design of the switchblade. My Errants have a gold one with a Vulcan nut in the middle. The Torrent has their sort of standard, based out of the movies, switchblade. They also have a Dark Empire one, which is a Sith theme. They have a Rebel one, which is a Jedi theme. And then they have the Ion, which you just saw there, which actually kind of has a neat ancient tech sort of feel to it, which I kind of like. But anyhow, some things about the Aegis. In terms of design, this thing is actually a step back towards the Errant in terms of design. With the Torrent, we saw that they took this switch plate and they sort of bent it in order to get a flush finish with the saber and make it very narrow. With this one, they've gone back to having that switch plate be flat and inset into the blade, like it was with the Errant. Now, this makes it a little bit less ergonomic, but it does make the switch plate easier to find and a little bit harder to trigger accidentally. Some other details on this: it is heavier than the Torrent by a fair bit. With a standard mid-grade 32-inch blade in it, the point of balance is right here, exactly on the emitter, which is actually really nice for hand spins. But the Torrent, it was up a little ways because that was a lighter saber. So we've got a heavier saber. We've got actually a little bit more counterbalance back here on the end. The other interesting thing about this design is that it features the struts. Now, those struts are these blue pieces right here. I'm not going to go ahead and take those off because those are cinched in there pretty dang tight. But the blue pieces right here, you can buy additional struts in different colors so that you can accessorize the saber if you like. And they have also talked quite a bit about different styles of struts that they'll be offering aftermarket on these things. I've actually been talking to them about spinning struts, because one of the things I'll look at in just a moment is that these things have some pretty hard edges here. But they have the potential for some customization later down the road, or some customization up front if you're just looking at different colors. One other thing that this model has that I wanted to cover, because it's definitely a step in the right direction for Electrum, it uses the same sort of pommel that the others do. We have a set screw right here, and the pommel just slides on over the rest of the saber. But unlike the others, which you had to worry about how you're going to get them lined up so that so that the pommel was on straight, the other ones end up getting like a little track mark of little scores from the set screw over time as you get it back on, not quite exactly in the same place. With these struts that the Aegis has introduced, two of the struts actually stick out past the pommel. I'll give you a close-up on this as well. What that means is that with the Aegis, for the first time, you actually have a guide that helps you put the saber's pommel back on straight, which is actually really nice. I really like that. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, these struts also give you the ability to create things that that fit in these recesses and hold them on with screws. I've done that on another one of my sabers that has sort of a similar strut design. Pommel on this thing is heavier, and actually the downside of those struts that work as a guide for the pommel, it does mean that unless you remove two of the struts, which you wouldn't want to necessarily do because there's this beveled empty bit in the pommel that looks really much, or it looks a lot like something's supposed to be there. Unless you remove those two long struts, this pommel is not interchangeable with their other models like the other ones are. You can still put the errant pommel or the torrent pommel on the Aegis, but you cannot put the Aegis pommel on the others without removing those struts. So in terms of design, this is a very sort of pillar-like design, kind of basic, a little bit Old Republic. There's some nice accents along the hilt here, but by and large it's fairly plain, except for the color accents. Nice sort of simple design. In terms of wielding though, if you're grabbing it up here at this choke point, which is one of the more natural places to grab it, you are finding yourself, like happened with the other models, your hand is going to be grazing the switch while you use it. Now these switches they've made more sensitive in the most recent models so that you don't have to hit all three to turn it off and on. You just have to hit two. With the torrent, that would happen accidentally quite a bit. You'd be turning the saber on accidentally. Not so much with the Aegis because of that recessed switch plate, but you will trigger like the flash on clash if you have clash on strike turned off, which is a feature of theirs where if it detects a strike or a lockup rather, it will automatically go into lockup. I said that wrong. Auto lockup. There we go. That's the feature. Auto lockup. If you have auto lockup turned on, when it detects a hit, it's going to automatically go into lockup. If you have that turned off, the lockup is the top button on the switch plate. And because your hand rides up so close to here, next to that top button, you're going to be triggering that lockup effect, sometimes accidentally if you're not careful. The other thing about it is these struts, as I mentioned before, are actually fairly sharp. They've got, they're not going to cut you just by holding it, but they are going to sort of eat at your hand a little bit. And if you're grabbing it at that choke point, two of those struts are right there on the inside of your grip. All right, that actually kind of encourages you to turn your grip sideways and move up a little bit, but it gives you less wiggle room with the saber. It also gives you less choke point because you see my thumb doesn't even really fit in this groove right here between the strut and this ridge. So in terms of use, for fancy spinning, those struts are actually going to kind of get in your way unless you learn to work with them. If you can, it's got a nice counterbalance that opens up some possibilities that some others don't. And it's actually plain enough that you can do rolls up the arm with it. For dueling, though, wait for the clock here. You guys must get tired of hearing that in my videos. Let's wait for the clock. I can't remember the number of times I've said that. But anyhow, for dueling purposes, this thing is a nice heavy saber, and you've got this sort of bulbous pommel here that gives you a nice place to grip right here. So you've got a double grip, and you can get some real nice power strokes on this. So I can see where they're going, calling this a dueling saber, calling it the Aegis or the shield. It is nice for that purpose. It's a little bit iffy for spinning unless you get used to it. In terms of heft, heftier, brawnier, a little bit more rugged than a lot of their other models, which were a lot more streamlined. If that's what you're going for, though, I've actually been showing this model off to a bunch of people, and most of the people that I've talked to have looked at it and said, that's the one. So this model actually plays really well with my friends. I prefer the other two to the Aegis, simply because of these sort of rough edges and the cylindrical overall look of it. But to each their own. The Aegis is offered in different finishes as well. This is a silver finish, so just like you can get different strut colors, red, gunmetal, gold, or blue, I think there's a black too, you can get this thing in a weathered, a polished, or not polished, but a silver, or a blackout version. And the blackout version, actually, this part, and this part are blacked out, and these two rings are left silver. So that's a neat design. Hopefully this has been of use to you. In terms of brightness, by the way, before I go, I will say that this thing is using the same insides as the other Electrum Sabers. So it is plenty bright. It's a quad-core red, green, blue, white LED, fully customizable through the app. Again, if you're curious about that, just look in the description for this video. You'll see a lot more detailed look when we look at the torrent. But there you have it. Electrum Sabercraft Aegis with the Ion switch plate. They've got some more models coming up. They just released the Remnant. That's an interesting looking model, and they've actually moved the switch plate down, so hopefully I'll get a chance to review one of those. But if this has been of use to you, please like and subscribe and join me back for more reviews.